February 16th, 1945, 650 miles north of Iwo Jima. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, Imperial Japanese Navy, watches from his cockpit as 106 American fighters appear on the horizon. Heading toward Tokyo, Sakai is 28 years old, from Saga Prefecture, and he is Japan's third highest scoring surviving ace, 64 confirmed victories. He lost his right eye over Guadalcanal in August 1942, nearly died, flew 3.5 hours back to base half blind, survived, returned to combat, and now, February 1945, he's flying combat air patrol over the home islands, protecting Tokyo. And these American fighters, they're not carrier-based, too far from any carrier group. They're land-based, from Iwo Jima. That means they've flown over 600 miles, will fight over Tokyo, and fly 600 miles back. No Japanese fighter can do this. No fighter Sakai knows of can do this. Sakai radios his flight, identifies the aircraft type. P-51 Mustangs. He's heard of them. Intelligence reports from China, from captured documents. Fast, long range, designed for bomber escort in Europe, and now, apparently, operating in the Pacific. Japanese pilots have been briefed. The Mustang is a high-altitude fighter, optimized for straight-line speed, weak in turning combat, standard American fighter, fast but not maneuverable, and Sakai has fought American fighters for 3 years, knows their weaknesses. Wildcats couldn't turn with zeros, Hellcats couldn't climb with zeros, and this Mustang, Sakai expects the same. Another American fighter that trades agility for speed, and in the hands of inexperienced American pilots, it won't matter. Japanese pilots know how to force turning engagements, how to exploit American training deficiencies, how to win. Sakai's flight climbs to intercept, 8 zeros, against over 100 Mustangs. The math is bad, but Japanese doctrine doesn't avoid bad math. Attack regardless of odds, and Sakai leads his flight into position. Altitude advantage, sun behind them. Classic zero tactics, and he selects a target, a Mustang slightly separated from the main formation. He dives, closes to 400 meters, and opens fire. 20mm cannon, 7.7mm machine guns, tracers arc toward the Mustang, and miss. The American brakes hard left and accelerates, not turning to fight, just leaving, using speed, and Sakai tries to follow, pulls his zero into a steep climb, tries to cut off the American's escape, but the Mustang is already gone, climbing faster, pulling away, and Sakai realizes this fighter is different, faster than anything he's encountered. And then he sees other Mustangs rolling in, from above, 4 of them. And Sakai understands, too late, the separated Mustang was bait. The Mustangs attack from altitude, high-speed diving passes, firing from 600 meters, long range, but their 650 caliber machine guns reach. Sakai breaks right, his wingman breaks left, and the formation scatters, every zero trying to evade, and the Mustangs don't chase into turning fights. They extend, climb, reset, and attack again. This pattern repeats. Mustangs diving, zeros evading, Mustangs climbing away before zeros can counterattack, and slowly, Sakai's flight is being destroyed. 1 zero shot down, another damaged, and Sakai orders withdrawal. What remains of his flight dives for cloud cover, escapes, barely, and Sakai returns to base, his aircraft undamaged, his pride shattered. And his report will trouble every Japanese commander who reads it. The Americans have deployed a fighter that Japanese tactics cannot defeat, a fighter that refuses to fight the way Japanese pilots are trained to fight, and a fighter that can appear over Tokyo, 650 miles from its base, fight and return, This changes everything. This engagement, February 16, 1945, represents the final evolution of American air power in the Pacific, the moment when Japanese air superiority, already eroding for 2 years, collapsed completely. And the weapon that delivered this final blow was a fighter never intended for Pacific combat, a fighter designed to escort bombers over Germany, but adapted, deployed, and employed with such devastating effect that Japanese pilots, even veterans like Sakai with years of combat experience, found themselves outmatched. This is the story of how the P-51 Mustang transformed from an object of Japanese ridicule to the symbol of American air dominance. How American industrial capacity and tactical adaptation defeated Japanese skill and tradition, and how one aircraft proved that in modern warfare, the side that can mass-produce excellence will always defeat the side that handcrafts perfection. Saburo Sakai was real. His memoirs, published as Samurai in 1957, provide first-hand Japanese pilot perspective on American fighters throughout the war. Sakai graduated from the Tsuchiura Naval Air Corps in 1937, flew combat missions over China from 1938, participated in the attack on the Philippines in December 1941, and fought over Guadalcanal, Rabaul, Iwo Jima, and the Japanese home islands. His survival through the entire war was extraordinary. Most Japanese fighter pilots who flew in 1941 were dead by 1943. Sakai survived because he was skilled, lucky, and smart enough to recognize when American advantages made continued combat suicidal. In his memoir, Sakai described the first time he encountered Mustangs over Japan. His account matches the February 16 raid. He wrote, "We had been told the Mustang was a European fighter, designed for high-altitude bomber escort, not suited for Pacific combat. When I engaged them over Tokyo, I realized immediately this assessment was wrong. The Mustang was faster than our Zero at all altitudes, could climb faster, could dive faster, and American pilots, while less experienced than our veterans, employed tactics that negated our maneuverability advantages. They would not turn with us, would not fight close. They attacked from altitude with speed, extended before we could counterattack, and returned to attack again. We could not force them into disadvantageous positions, could not exploit their weaknesses because they had none we could reach." The North American P-51 Mustang was born from British desperation. In April 1940, the Royal Air Force needed fighters urgently, approached North American Aviation with a purchase order for Curtiss P-40 Warhawks. North American's response was audacious. "We can design and build a better fighter in less time than it would take to set up P-40 production." The RAF agreed. 120 days later, the first prototype flew. October 1940, the NA-73, designated Mustang MK Grand by the RAF. The early Mustang had problems. The Allison V1710 engine provided good low-altitude performance, but struggled above 15,000 feet. British test pilots recognized potential but noted the altitude limitation. Then, in 1942, Rolls-Royce test pilot Ronald Harker flew a Mustang, recognized that fitting it with a Merlin engine would transform performance. The modification was tested. Results exceeded expectations. The P-51B, with Packard-built Merlin V1650 engine, achieved 440 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, service ceiling 41,900 feet, and with drop tanks, range exceeded 1,600 miles. This was unprecedented. No fighter combined speed, altitude performance, range, and firepower at this level. The United States Army Air Forces immediately recognized the Mustang's potential for bomber escort. By late 1943, P-51 B and C models were escorting 8th Air Force bombers over Germany. The impact was immediate. German fighter losses increased, bomber losses decreased, and by mid-1944, Mustangs were escorting bombers to Berlin and back, a mission German commanders had believed impossible for single-engine fighters. But the Pacific was different. Pacific air combat emphasized carrier operations, shorter ranges, lower altitudes, and dogfighting. Close-in turning engagements where maneuverability mattered more than speed. The F-6F Hellcat was optimized for this combat. Rugged, good firepower, could absorb damage and keep flying, and the Hellcat's kill ratio against Japanese aircraft eventually reached 19-1. For carrier operations, the Hellcat was ideal. But by late 1944, American strategy shifted. B-29 superfortresses were bombing Japan from the Mariana Islands, 1,500-mile missions, and Japanese fighter interception was severe. B-29 losses were mounting. The Army Air Forces needed long-range escort fighters. The only aircraft capable of the mission was the Mustang. In December 1944, the first Mustang units deployed to Iwo Jima, the 7th Fighter Command. 3 groups, 15th, 21st, and 506th. Their mission was simple: escort B-29s to Japan, destroy Japanese fighters, establish air superiority over the home islands. The distance from Iwo Jima to Tokyo was 650 nautical miles one way, 1,300 miles a round trip, with combat over the target. No fighter had ever operated at these ranges in sustained combat operations. But Mustangs, equipped with drop tanks, had the range. And on February 16, 1945, 106 Mustangs launched. Destination: Tokyo. Japanese reaction to intelligence reports about Mustangs deploying to the Pacific was dismissive. Lieutenant Commander Masatake Okumiya, Imperial Japanese Navy fighter operations officer, later wrote in his memoir, Zero Fighter, that Japanese pilots initially regarded the Mustang as just another American fighter. Fast in straight lines, weak in turns, American pilots were known to avoid dogfighting, and Japanese pilots, with their superior training and more maneuverable aircraft, believed they could force turning engagements and achieve victory. This confidence was based on experience. Japanese pilots had repeatedly defeated American fighters through superior maneuvering in the early war. Why would the Mustang be different? The answer became clear over Tokyo on February 16. Japanese Air Defense Command scrambled over 300 fighters, A6M Zeros, Ki-43 Hayabusa fighters, Ki-44 Shoki interceptors, J-2M Raiden interceptors, everything available. Japanese commanders saw an opportunity: 100 American fighters, far from base, low on fuel after long flight, vulnerable. The trap seemed perfect, and Japanese fighters climbed to intercept. Colonel Russell Keeler commanded the 15th Fighter Group leading the mission. His after-action report, preserved in Air Force Historical Research Agency archives, described the engagement. Made landfall north of Tokyo at approximately 14:30 hours. Encountered heavy enemy fighter opposition at 26,000 feet. Estimated strength 100 plus enemy aircraft. Enemy attempted to force engagement through head-on attacks and climbing interceptions. Our pilots maintained altitude and energy advantages, engaged enemy with hit-and-run tactics, did not attempt sustained turning combat. Enemy could not force advantageous engagement. We maintained initiative throughout. This was the critical difference. American Mustang pilots had been trained specifically to avoid Japanese strengths. Don't dogfight, use speed, use altitude, attack from advantage, disengage before enemy can respond, and climb away. This was called boom and zoom, and it worked because the Mustang's performance made it possible. Japanese pilots tried to force turning engagements. Mustangs refused. Every time Japanese fighters turned to engage, Mustangs used speed to extend beyond weapon range, climbed, reset, and attacked again. Japanese pilots described the frustration in post-war interrogations conducted by United States strategic bombing survey teams. Warrant Officer Takeo Tanamizu, who flew Zeros defending Tokyo, stated, "American pilots would not fight honorably, would not engage in proper combat. They attacked from high altitude at high speed, fired brief bursts, and climbed away before we could counterattack. We tried to force them into turning fights where our superior maneuverability would give advantage. They refused, would not turn, would not slow down. We could not catch them. They were faster than us at all altitudes, faster in climbs, faster in dives. We had no tactic that worked." The numbers from February 16 told the story. American pilots claimed 26 Japanese aircraft destroyed. Post-war analysis confirmed 20 confirmed, with 12 more probably destroyed. American losses were 7 Mustangs, 2 to enemy fire, 5 to mechanical issues or fuel exhaustion. The exchange ratio favored Americans roughly 3 to 1, but more important than numbers was the psychological impact. Americans had flown to Tokyo, fought, and returned. This demonstrated capability Japanese defenses could not stop. Wing Commander Minoru Genda analyzed the raid in a report dated February 20, 1945. Genda had planned the Pearl Harbor attack, was one of Japan's most respected tactical thinkers, and his assessment was brutally frank. According to declassified Japanese documents, translated by Allied translator and interpreter section, Genda wrote, "American P-51 fighters demonstrate performance superiority, rendering our current fighter aircraft obsolete for homeland defense. Enemy employs energy tactics negating our maneuverability advantages. Our pilots cannot force favorable engagement. Unless we develop fighters matching Mustang performance, or enemy pilots commit tactical errors, we cannot effectively defend against bomber formations escorted by these aircraft. Recommend immediate development and production of high-speed, high-altitude interceptors. Current fighter inventory is inadequate." Genda's recommendations were sound, but Japan lacked industrial capacity to implement them. The best Japanese fighters under development, the Ki-84 Frank and N-1KJ George, showed promise, but production was minimal. Ki-84 production reached approximately 3,400 units total before war's end. N-1KJ production was roughly 1,400. Compare this to American Mustang production. Over 15,000 P-51 Mustangs built during the war. American industry produced more Mustangs in 8 months than Japan produced of its most advanced fighters in 2 years. The technical comparison explains Japanese inability to compete. P-51, D specifications, maximum speed 440 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, service ceiling 41,900 feet, rate of climb 3,200 feet per minute, combat radius with drop tanks 750 miles, armament 650 caliber M2, Browning machine guns with 1,880 rounds total. The Packard 5.1650 engine produced 1,690 horsepower at war emergency power. At 28,000 feet, the Mustang's high-altitude performance was unmatched by any Japanese fighter in service. The Mitsubishi A6M50, Japan's most numerous fighter, could not compete at altitude. Nakajima Sakai 21 engine produced 1,130 horsepower at takeoff. performance degraded rapidly above 20,000 feet. At 25,000 feet, where Mustangs typically engaged, the Zero was significantly slower, could not catch Mustangs in level flight, could not escape in dives, could not match climb rates. The Zero's advantage, low-speed maneuverability, was irrelevant because Mustang pilots refused low-speed combat. Japanese pilots adapted tactics. If they couldn't defeat Mustangs in energy combat, they'd avoid Mustangs entirely, focus attacks on bombers, accept fighter losses but damage primary targets. This was kamikaze philosophy applied to conventional tactics. Sacrifice to strike. But this failed for a fundamental reason. Mustangs were faster, could intercept Japanese fighters before they reached bombers, and Japanese fighters, forced to fight through Mustang screens, took devastating losses. The Battle of Okinawa demonstrated complete American air dominance. From April through June 1945, Japanese forces launched over 1,900 kamikaze sorties. Conventional attacks added thousands more. American defenses destroyed approximately 75% before reaching targets. Mustang Combat Air Patrol, vectored by radar, intercepted raids at maximum distance from invasion fleet. Once engaged, Mustangs used altitude advantage and firepower to destroy Japanese aircraft. 650 caliber machine guns firing armor-piercing incendiary rounds destroyed most Japanese aircraft with brief bursts. Major George Preddy, top Mustang ace in Europe with 26.8 victories, was killed in December 1944 before Pacific deployment. But his tactical doctrines, developed fighting Luftwaffe, were distributed to Pacific units. Preddy's manual emphasized energy management, maintain speed, use altitude, never get slow in turning fight. These principles worked equally well against Japanese fighters. American pilots studied them, applied them, achieved similar results. Saburo Sakai survived the war, became one of few Japanese aces to provide comprehensive post-war testimony. His memoir and interviews with American historians provided invaluable Japanese perspective. Sakai's assessment was that American victory resulted from industrial capacity, creating quantitative and qualitative advantages Japanese forces could not counter. The Mustang symbolized this superiority. Combined performance Japanese aircraft couldn't match with production numbers Japanese industry couldn't approach. Lieutenant General Minoru Genda, post-war, wrote that Mustangs appearing over Tokyo in February 1945 marked the moment he knew Japanese air defense was finished. Not because they destroyed significant numbers of Japanese aircraft in one raid, but because they demonstrated American capability to project fighter power at ranges Japanese defenders couldn't counter. According to his memoir, published in Japanese in 1962, Genda stated, "The Mustang's appearance over Tokyo proved American industrial superiority was decisive. They could build aircraft combining extreme performance with extreme range, mass-produce them, deploy them across the Pacific, and operate them continuously. We could not match this. Our industry was exhausted. Our pilots were undertrained. Our fuel was depleted, and our aircraft were obsolete against this enemy." Japanese pilot training collapsed as war progressed. In 1941, Navy pilots received 700 flight hours before combat assignment. By 1944, this dropped to 100 hours or less. Replacement pilots arrived at combat units barely able to fly. Meanwhile, American training expanded. By 1945, American fighter pilots received 220 hours flight training before combat assignment, plus additional theater orientation. This meant average American replacements had more experience than Japanese survivors. The kill ratio reflected this disparity. In 1944, American fighters achieved approximately 6-1 against Japanese aircraft Pacific-wide. In 1945, this increased to 15-1. Mustang units specifically achieved ratios approaching 20-1 in many engagements. These ratios reflected not just aircraft performance, but systemic advantages: better training, more fuel for practice, unlimited replacement aircraft, and doctrine maximizing aircraft strengths while minimizing exposure to enemy strengths. By August 1945, Japanese air defenses had ceased effective resistance. American aircraft operated over Japan with near impunity. B-29 formations bombed in daylight with minimal losses. Mustangs strafed airfields and destroyed aircraft on the ground. Japanese fighters scrambled but were outnumbered and quickly destroyed. The few experienced pilots remaining avoided combat when possible, preserving themselves for expected invasion. That invasion never came. The Mustang's Pacific legacy was not just military but psychological. It demonstrated American industrial power could produce weapons surpassing Japanese technology, that American pilots, trained in months not years, could defeat Japanese veterans through superior equipment and doctrine, and that Japanese strategy of victory through superior spirit and training was obsolete in industrial warfare. The irony was complete. Japanese pilots who initially dismissed the Mustang as another fast but clumsy American fighter learned otherwise through experience. The Mustang won not through dogfighting, through refusing to dogfight, through using speed, altitude, firepower to engage only when advantageous, through being produced in numbers making losses irrelevant, and through being flown by pilots confident their aircraft gave them every advantage. That confidence, backed by performance and numbers, ruled Pacific skies, ended Japanese air power, not through one battle, through systematic, relentless superiority, making every engagement mathematical exercise in attrition. Attrition Japan couldn't sustain, that America sustained indefinitely. The Mustang proved what Japanese commanders feared from the start. Industrial capacity mattered more than warrior spirit, and America had capacity. In overwhelming measure, the laughter stopped. The sky belonged to America, and the Mustang was the reason why.